now on PBS. How would you define lifetime medical benefits? Something to do with the rest of your life? More and more people are finding out otherwise.
Never thought of it until I retired, and I really got a surprise when it hit home.
Companies think they have a solution for rising health care costs, cutting the benefits of retirees.
They keep saying, isn't there a law? How could this be legal? That they could just promise us something, give it to us in writing, and take it away.
All that on now. With David Brancaccio. The weekly news magazine from PBS. Funding for Now has been provided by the Orfalea Family Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Town Creek Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Now, from Huntington, West Virginia, Public Broadcasting's David Brancaccio.
Welcome. This historic railroad town in West Virginia is just one front in a national battle over the health benefits of retired workers. Some companies are finding creative ways to reduce those benefits, using novel tactics like suing their former employees. You heard right. And there's legal hair splitting. Does lifetime benefit mean the life of the retiree or just the lifetime of the contract? Brenda Breslauer produced our report. "60-year-old retiree Basil Chapman has a problem faced by millions of retirees. His health care costs have just gone up. Chapman is part of an increasingly rare breed, a union man who worked his entire career for the same company, railroad car manufacturer ACF Industries.
It was a heavy industry. The people in that plant, they worked hard.
Chapman painted these cars inside and out. As part of that job, he spent the better part of 30 years breathing acrid paint fumes.
Yeah, I used to stencil those numbers and stuff on every paint. Certain parts of your body, it sets them on fire when you come out of there.
So when you put in an 8-hour day, that was, you gave him a lot of labor.
It's a great toll on your body.
How many years you say? 30?
38 and a half.
Basil, that's a good chunk of your life with that company.
That's just about the whole chunk. Yes.
Chapman now has emphysema. He took early retirement in 2002 for health reasons, but he wasn't worried about his medical bills because of the top-notch health benefits he had from his years at ACF.
And to my understanding, and 600 and some retirees' understanding, that was for life.
For life, he says, and he's confident of that because he headed the bargaining committee that negotiated the contract for his union, the Huntington, West Virginia local of the United Steelworkers. So imagine his surprise in December of 2003 when his union called and said an ACF executive was looking for him to discuss a change in the benefits plan.
He said he was going to reduce the retirement benefits, make people start paying for part of their insurance. And I said, you can't do that. Well, we got a contract to go by. He said, oh, yes, I can. You don't have a contract. So I said, well, I'll see you in federal court.
Stories like Chapman's are playing out across the country. Retirees who thought they were guaranteed lifetime health benefits shocked to learn that their former employer thinks otherwise. Journalist Ellen Schultz has tenaciously pursued this story for the Wall Street Journal, interviewing hundreds of retirees along the way.
They're astonished, mostly. They were told they would have coverage, and in many cases, they retired with this promise. Many of them had it in writing. They keep saying, isn't there a law? How could this be legal? That they could just promise us something, give it to us in writing, and take it away.
But companies have been taking it away ever since healthcare costs started skyrocketing. The floodgates opened in 1998 after a key court case was decided. General Motors had cut coverage for some 50,000 employees who had taken early retirement. The retirees sued, citing company brochures that advised health care coverages will be provided at GM's expense for your lifetime. But the court ruled that a specific sentence contained in the health plan documents saying the company reserves the right to change the plan trumped all the other promises.
It doesn't matter what you promised verbally, what the HR person told you. What matters is whether the company put this language in their document. It doesn't matter that the retirees never saw the document, that they don't know the document exists, that they can't get it sometimes even if they ask for it. What mattered was that the companies said, we wrote in our plan documents a specific sentence. We said we reserved the right to change the benefits.
Retirees are always shocked to find that basically a promise that was made to them can be broken just because there's certain language hidden in the plan document somewhere.
Mary Ellen Signorelli has spent the past 25 years working on employee benefits issues. She's a senior staff attorney with the seniors lobby, the AARP. When a company cuts health benefits for retirees, she hears about it.
I'm the one who gets the phone calls from the members. And the real issue for AARP members and for older workers is it's difficult to do your retirement planning if it turns out that your retiree health benefits are going to be cut and you don't know about it.
After the GM case, employers became more aggressive in scaling back or cutting coverage altogether. According to one study, 79% of companies made retirees pay more for their health benefits just in the last year.
I work every day with senior benefits professionals from companies who are very anguished to have to go out and meet with retiree groups and explain to them about the changes that need to be made.
James Klein is president of the American Benefits Council, an advocacy organization for major corporations who offer benefits programs. He says that most of his member companies are leaders, providing generous health benefits, and do so voluntarily.
As a group, the companies that are providing retiree health care coverage are the good guys. We have to remember that these are companies that in the first instance offered a benefit that they were not required to offer, but felt it was the right thing to do.
Back in the 70s, when retiree health benefits were given to employees, they were part of the social contract, part of the promise that employers made to employees. And during the 70s, it was a relatively inexpensive employee benefit. Healthcare costs weren't that high, and if you looked at the demographics, people weren't living as long as they are living now. So for the employer, it was a relatively inexpensive and great way to keep morale among employees.
A morale booster, perhaps, but many unions paid for those benefits by giving up other compensation. When Basil Chapman was at the contract bargaining table, he says his union accepted lower starting wages in return for these lifetime benefits. So when a company says things like, the health care benefits was a freebie, this is something we give the retirees, what would your reaction be to that?
No, nothing's freebie, you pay for it. That's money per hour that you spend in that plant every day. And now they're trying to take it back.
You talk to some retirees and they say, look, this wasn't just a company giving us some benefits, but in fact the employees paid for it in some sense. It was part of a negotiation.
That does not necessarily correspond to say that for the rest of that person's life, that there was never going to be a change made in the cost sharing between the employer and the retiree to provide that benefit.
Klein is using an argument that many companies make, characterizing the benefits as a perk that they have a right to rescind. But Schultz reports it was actually part of an economic calculation that helped keep wages down in exchange for future benefits.
It was a large IOU from the company. It benefited the companies because they could save the cash and pay it later, use the cash in the short term to grow the company, and it was good for the employees as well because they could look forward to protection in their old age. Then, of course, when they retire, this huge IOU is coming due. You have millions of corporate retirees. Now the companies are saying, we can't afford to pay that.
That's exactly what happened to the benefits of some 2,000 retirees now in their 70s and 80s who used to work for another company, General Tire and Rubber.
Sooner or later, you'll own Generals.
Remember the old jingle? Today the company is called GenCorp and known more for aerospace and defense. 83-year-old former tire inspector Ken Botolfs retired in 1981 after 35 years with General Tire. As president of his local rubber workers union in Waco, Texas, he too had negotiated his share of labor contracts. He and his wife had excellent health coverage, and he says he was certain that coverage would continue for the rest of their lives, based on decades of company promises and contracts.
I can tell you that in many negotiations, we were told by high corporate employees that we would receive these benefits for life. It was verbal and written in the contract.
Recently, the Botolfs have needed to rely on this coverage.
My wife was hospitalized 4 times this past year. If we hadn't had medical insurance, we'd have been, well, we'd just been in a rough situation. We just couldn't have met the bills. $1,080, I think I got.
For years, their coverage cost them nothing. Then in 2000, the company began charging the couple $180 a month, and it's gone up steadily ever since. Today, that coverage is costing them $768 a month, more than erasing Ken's pension. Keep in mind, these costs are for expenses Medicare isn't covering already.
I realize that medical costs have risen an awful lot, but we do question the amount that they are charging us.
So did Ellen Schultz. Stories like these puzzled her. Yes, healthcare costs were going up, but she wondered why retiree health costs were going up so much faster.
National healthcare costs have been rising 10 to 12% annually. Retirees' healthcare costs, when they get their bills, those costs have been rising 200, 300, 400%. Their premiums have gone from $60 a month to $500, $800, even $1,000. Something doesn't add up. How can national health care inflation be 10% and retirees be 500%? So what's going on here?
She found the answer in public documents corporations file with the government.
These are the filings, the 10Ks and annual reports that companies turn in every year.
Schultz discovered that in the 1990s, to protect themselves from rising health care costs, many companies set limits on the maximum amount they would pay each year for retiree coverage. In the case of GenCorp, the company set an annual cap of $2,700 for each retiree and spouse. If they want to continue their coverage, the Botolfs have to pay all additional costs once the cap is reached.
The amount of money that they've set aside to pay their retirees per year, they claim is $2,700. That's when they say they have to charge us. And they sure have.
Last year, their medical plan cost nearly $11,000. While GenCorp paid $2,700, the Botolfs had to come up with the rest, more than $8,200, money that came out of their savings, pensions, and Social Security. So the company's been able to shift the risk, really, of rising health care costs. The ones who figured this out no longer have the risk.
Yes, they've shifted the risk of rising cost onto the retirees and away from the company. So they're protected from rising health care costs, no matter how sick the retirees get, no matter how long they live.
And there's even more here than meets the eye. When costs rise so high that retirees are forced to drop out of these plans, Schultz says companies may actually benefit, if not profit.
Once the company hits its ceiling, they're protected, but the retirees aren't. And this creates a very perverse situation. It means that the companies no longer have any incentive to keep costs down. In fact, they benefit if costs rise.
How could they benefit if costs were to rise to the retirees?
Well, if the costs keep rising, you know that the retirees at some point won't be able to afford it anymore. And in fact, when the costs rise, more of them drop out, even the sick ones drop out. There are two things that happen for a company then. It benefits in two ways. One is it no longer has to pay the amount it was going to spend. That's a cash savings. But there's a second savings, and this is the key to what has been happening at many companies. The second savings is this. Companies have estimated how much it will cost to pay for all these people. They've established a liability on their books.
And if that retiree drops out of the health care plan, you can remove that liability from your bottom line.
All of it.
So that's serious money in some cases.
In fact, when retirees drop out, it is boosting companies' income. And depending on how many people drop out, you get enough gains added to your income on a quarterly basis, that it can actually help you meet your earnings targets.
James Klein of the American Benefits Council would not comment on the specific circumstances of the benefits of particular companies, but he does not accept the logic here.
I think the notion that employers somehow profit through the sponsorship of their benefit plans is ludicrous. If the company simply is interested in reducing its cost, it could follow the national trend and terminate retiree health care altogether. But I think that companies that are doing everything possible to continue to sponsor benefits for their retirees are the companies that really ought to be applauded.
But you wouldn't applaud a company that's trying to get out of previous obligations?
Certainly not. I mean, if a company has made a specific promise, then presumably they are expected to honor that promise.
But retirees like Ken Botolphs claim their former employers are not honoring promises and are finding creative ways around not just promises, but signed labor contracts. In the 1990s, GenCorp required its retirees to sign a new benefits enrollment form. At the bottom of the page was some fine print saying the retirees agreed to pay any contributions required under the new plan, and that the benefits on this form replaced any medical benefits from any prior GenCorp retiree medical plans. You can see it better with a magnifying glass or the aid of TV graphics.
And the retirees, of course, when the company started to increase their costs, said, we didn't sign away our right to free coverage. But the company said, it's in writing, you signed.
And a retiree might worry that if he doesn't sign at all, it might interrupt any coverage.
Yes, retirees are terrified that if they don't sign their forms, they'll lose coverage altogether.
It looked sneaky, I suppose, through the prism of the retirees.
The retirees say they were tricked. They say they would never in their right minds give up health coverage. Why would they do such a thing?
So the retirees have gone to court to try to get their full lifetime benefits reinstated. And even the very understanding of lifetime is under dispute. Does lifetime mean the life of the contract or the life of the retirees? GenCorp's retirees say they were promised full medical benefits for life and cite decades of labor contracts and company memos. GenCorp declined to talk to us, citing the pending litigation, but in court papers argues the retiree benefits expired with each contract, and what's more, that lifetime doesn't mean a lifetime of health benefits without change or at no cost. The way the retirees see it, the company is dragging out the legal wrangling.
It gives me the impression that they're just trying to wait us out, and they're fighting this thing in court, tooth and nail.
Since the lawsuit began in the year 2000, of the 9 initial plaintiffs, 1 has suffered a debilitating stroke and 2 have died.
I told Ken I felt like maybe they were just waiting for everybody to die. You feel that way when so many our age, have been passing away, and you think, well, there's not going to be many left for them to worry about before long.
When you talk to companies, they say, look, we entered these agreements in good faith, but the world changed. Healthcare costs went through the roof. The basis under which this agreement was signed has now been altered. What do you say to that argument?
Well, I don't think corporate America could survive if it was not able to rely on contracts. If it's a commitment with a supplier and you decide you can't afford it, you say, look, I know that we promised to pay you for this, we can't. Well, that supplier is going to sue you, and you'll end up in court.
Which is exactly where Basil Chapman finds himself. But how that happened is quite a jaw-dropper. Just a week after he spoke to his former employer, ACF, and learned that they were cutting his benefits, he received written notice that the company was suing him. So let me get this straight. This is your ex-employer, ACF, suing you so that they could charge you more for your benefits. How can they do that?
I don't know. I asked that question myself. I said, why are they picking on me,
Why would they want to file a suit against retirees?
What has developed is a strategy to try and have the cases heard in courts that have had a history of siding with employers on benefits matters. So the way that you're more likely to have this happen is if you go ahead and sue the retirees first as a sort of preemptive strike. You sue them as you cut their benefits at the same time.
Here's how it played out for Basil Chapman. Remember that phone call which led to Chapman threatening to sue? Well, the company sued first, filing court papers the very next business day, using Chapman's call as a reason for taking him to court. Chapman's lawyers believe the company was trying to provoke Chapman as a way to get the legal dispute rolling.
This, to my opinion, was a set-up deal.
A set-up deal?
Yeah, it was a set-up deal. They needed a controversy is what they needed, I think, and they knew they could get it from me.
ACF filed suit in St. Louis, where the health plan is administered, a jurisdiction with a history of decisions favorable to employers and hundreds of miles away from the retirees. But the judge found the company appeared to be shopping for a friendly court, saying that ACF had engaged in a proverbial race to the courthouse and transferred the case to West Virginia, where the retirees had worked.
Really, even if they lose the court case, they really hadn't lost. You got people that couldn't pay anymore. They'd done been paying to the max. They canceled it. Plus the people's died since then. So it's been a year now. If it goes another year, well, they can lose, but and then again, they don't lose.
And the fact is, there is little downside for a company to cut benefits and see how it plays out in court. There are no punitive damages if the company loses, and the most Basil Chapman would ever recover are the benefits he already had.
Never really thought about it until I retired. Always belonged to a union. I had protection, and contracts and things like that. But you know, once you retire, you got nobody but the courts. You got the labor board, no jurisdiction. They can't help you. Unions, they can't help you because you're retired. You don't belong to the union once you retire. You got nobody. You got the courts.
We tried to talk to Chapman's former company, but ACF Industries, which is now controlled by financier Carl Icahn, did not return our phone calls. In court papers, the company refers to a plan description stating it reserves the right to change the plan at any time, and also argues that the retiree benefits expire with each labor contract.
Look, there's nobody in their right mind who's going to sit down at that table and negotiate a retirement package or an insurance package and then tell this company, I'm going to retire this year and 2 years later you can take it all back. That's not going to happen.
Retirees across the country say their former employers have broken the promises made to them. Chapman is worried about what it means for the future.
The real danger in this, David, is if they win this court battle, is they could come up next week and say, hey, we decided you're not going to have any insurance. And that would be the end of it. That's what they're saying. They're saying they got a right to modify or do away with.
So that's what you're fighting for. You're really fighting for any insurance.
Exactly. This is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
I wouldn't sit around expecting a government solution to this problem anytime soon. We're hearing a lot about overhauling Social Security and rewriting the tax code, but healthcare reform is not much of a priority in Washington these days. Now here's what we're working on for next week on Now. What happens when companies shed jobs while the government is punching holes in the safety net? You get increased financial risk and insecurity for working Americans.
We're playing in an economy that is much more competitive. Some are going to win and some are going to lose. And when you lose, you could lose really big and bigger than in an economy that is much more stable and has a floor to it.
And that's it for now. I'm David Brancaccio. We'll see you next week.
To order this episode of Now on DVD, Call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.
Connect to Now online at pbs.org. Get government tips on retiree health plans. What you need to know about the new Medicare. Find online resources for retired people. Connect to Now at pbs.org.
Who do you trust to tell all sides of a story? Who do you trust to let different voices be heard? Who do you trust to teach your children? Who do you trust to help make sense of it all? Americans trust PBS more than any other television network.
Funding for Now has been provided by the Orphala Family Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Town Creek Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
We are PBS.
I'm Amy Tan. My passion is to tell stories, like the one about the Joy Luck Club, or a cat named Sagwa. Imagination feeds the work I do. PBS Kids builds strong readers because it builds strong imaginations. So support your PBS station and become part of a wonderful story, right?